Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for paying attention during the seminar.
You're welcome. We have a thing going back and forth in regards to Robert's rules, so it's just kind of a fun banter. But good evening, all. This is the Historic Preservation Commission, Wednesday, July 6, 2022, and it's 6 p.m. And we're here today and looking to call to order. If I could get a roll call, please.
Commissioner Carrie Schmelter.
Here.
Commissioner Mary Box-Bell.
Here.
Commissioner Jesse Solomon.
Present.
Commissioner Bruce Timber.
Here?
Commissioner Josh Simpson.
Here.
Commissioner Evan Goodwin.
Here.
Everyone is here, so we have a quorum, correct?
Yes.
Notice regarding adjournment, the Historic Preservation Commission will not hear new items after 9:30 unless authorized by a majority vote of the commission members present. Items which have not been heard after 9:30 may be continued to the next regular meeting or special meeting as determined by the commission members. Notice regarding public comments. Every member of the public who is recognized to speak shall address the chairman and, in speaking, avoid disrespect to the commission, staff, or other members of the meeting. State your name and address when speaking for the record. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Let's see, we have an adoption of the agenda. And as written, can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda as written.
Thank you. Looking for a second?
A second.
And it looks like any discussion? If not, a vote. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
And adoption of minutes. Adoption of agenda. Excuse me, adoption of minutes now for the June 1st, 2022. Hope everyone had a chance to review this. And I'm looking for a motion to adopt the minutes as written.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the minutes as written.
Thank you. I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussions? If not, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Passed unanimously. Public comments for items not on the agenda? Any public comments listed?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to jump in here for a second, we did receive a written comment. It is primarily to do with one of the agenda items. This was received after the staff packages, or after staff had compiled the packages and sent them out. The person who has drafted the comment, Ms. Hayward, Joan M. Hayward of 95 Boundary Street, has requested that it be read into the record. Ultimately, it's in the discretion of the HPC, but again, because this is an application with a certificate of appropriateness involving a contributing structure, we welcome public input, and so I think it should be at the very least incorporated within the record, if not read. But I would leave it to your discretion as to whether you would like it read right now, or whether you would prefer that it happen as part of the certificate of appropriateness application and after the presentations.
Is it for a particular item on the agenda? I take it, is it on for number 2 or number 1?
It is focused on issue number 2, the certificate of appropriateness for the Joyner House.
Okay, so I guess in the best manner, would it be best if we reviewed it then or reviewed it now? What's the difference? I mean, as long as this becomes part of our...
I would recommend that you have it heard at with the second item, just simply because it could impact y'all's decision making.
Very good.
Give everybody an opportunity to respond.
If we could do it then, thank you. Anything else? Any other?
Not for me, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. So therefore, we're looking at old business. I don't believe we have any old business. And now we're into new business, and that's up to you, Katie.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. The first item that we have before us tonight on new business is a certificate of appropriateness for 18 Tabby Shell Road, which is lot number 10 in the Tabby Roads development. This is to allow the demolition of the existing garden structure and the construction of a new two-story carriage house structure of approximately 968 square feet to be located at 18 Tabby Shell Road. It is in the Old Town Bluffton Historic District, zoned neighborhood general HD, which is that orange zoning district. This lot is surrounded on all sides by the same zoning district and is located on the corner here. If you were to expand this site plan a little bit further, you would have the post office within Tabby Roads, or that small little building at the roundabout circle, right at the top of the slide here. So my mouse doesn't show up on the screen very well. So it'd be at the top of the screen there. You can see the curve where the traffic circle begins in that development. The floor plans for the structure are right here. So the first floor is a garage with the second story having a guest suite. And the elevations are shown here. So the front elevation is what faces towards the house. The rear elevation is this side here with the garage doors that faces, I think it's Barnacle Lane, which is the access alley that runs behind the Tabby Roads development there. So it runs parallel to that power line easement that runs the length of the property here. And then you have the right side elevation. So this is if you were facing from the little mail center looking at it, and the other side is the one that faces the adjacent property. I've included for you some sections and details. However, they have been reviewed fully in your packets. So you've got those in your staff report. Should we need to look at them, they are available here. And then I've also provided for reference only what the primary structure for this site looks like. So you've got the elevations for that primary structure to ensure that the carriage house shares the same general character as that primary structure. I just would like to note real quick on the site plan, it does encroach in the side setback right here. However, this did go before the Board of Zoning Appeals to ask for a variance to allow the encroachment within this. The BZA ruled that because this is a uniquely shaped lot and the setback is one that goes to the conservation easement, which typically would be an easement rather than a property line, it was a deviation that should be allowed, or a variance that should be allowed, and so they granted that variance. So it sits approximately 2 feet 7 inches from the property line at the back corner. However, it sits further than that at 5 feet 3 inches at the front. So the top left corner of the house is just over that 5-foot requirement, but the top right is just under that requirement. However, it's been allowed by the BZA to encroach in that setback. This is an application that you all have seen before, a certificate of appropriateness. So the HPC considers the criteria that are found in section 318.3 of the Unified Development Ordinance when assessing this application, and is authorized to approve the application as submitted by the applicant, approve the application with conditions, or deny the application as submitted by the applicant. Kurt Hall is here, or I'm sorry, yes, Kurt Hall is here with Thomas Hyatt Architects, I almost called him Thomas, to speak on behalf of the project for you tonight. However, staff has found that with the following condition, which is a letter of approval from the Tabby Roads HARB, it would meet the requirements in that and recommends that HPC approve the application. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Do you have anything to comment?
If I could have you come speak into the microphone, please.
Hello, my name is Kurt Hall. We did receive an approval from the Tabby Roads POA on the project, so we do have that requirement. It just came in this past week, so wanted to bring that to your attention. So that particular aspect has been achieved. I really didn't have anything to add, just here available if you have any questions or anything.
Any comments about this project? I guess one of the comments is it's pretty nice to see a project with very few comments.
I like that as well.
So thank you for doing your homework.
Yes, sir.
That being said, is there any discussions with the commissioners? And if not, I'm looking for a motion, please.
I motion we pass as submitted.
I'll second it.
You seconded. Any further discussions? No further discussions. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed? It's approved as submitted, and again, thank you for doing your homework and not having tons of comments on this.
Thank you very much for your service. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Would you please, we have a second item on our agenda, and I believe there was a public comment, and at this time, we'd like to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, and again, if I may, if I may for the record, Richardson LaBruce, thank you, Melanie Marks and LaBruce, here representing the town of Bluffton and helping guide the HPC. There are two issues that we need to discuss before this application is heard by the board. The first issue is the submission of materials after the staff had provided y'all the application and their response. I think there were a handful of notes by the applicant and a couple of pages worth of notes that the applicant wanted to bring to the attention of the board, the commission. And like we deal with this quite a bit, where these applications come in and then there are responses afterwards in response to staff's comments. Typically, what we have recommended in the past, it's the nature of the comments. If it's a applicant who is responding and providing additional information versus more technical materials, it does make a difference. So something like new revised plans, we usually urge the board or the commission not to consider that because staff hasn't gotten an opportunity to fully review and vet. However, if it's a response and it's something that is not technical in nature, but is more communicative to provide additional information to the committee, or the commission so that they can make a decision, we would recommend that y'all take that because, this is their opportunity. It's a time-consuming and expensive process to go through, and we try to avoid delay whenever we could and whenever we can. So I have a few of those materials available. I believe they have all been handed out to the members of the HPC.
I think they were emailed to us. Did everybody receive that email?
Yes.
And are we all in acknowledgement of receiving that email?
Yes.
If y'all would like to have those incorporated as part of the package that's up for consideration tonight, I would encourage you to do so, but make sure that we have Carrie incorporate that into the materials. But
Do we need to vote on that? Would that be best?
it never hurts to vote. I don't think you have to.
Okay.
But
I guess
Mr. Chairman, we have a recusal.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask when was the appropriate time for me to recuse myself. Is it
That
too
would be
late?
fine of it. Nope.
Okay.
There's never too late.
you haven't voted or anything, so just get on out.
Do I need to leave the room?
No.
Okay,
You
good.
can
Stick
sit
around.
in the back,
Okay, thank you.
but you just can't contribute to the meeting. That's what the recusal does. Okay?
Sure.
So I guess I'm looking at this as additional information and not a change as I reviewed it and read it. And again, I'm getting the acknowledgement that everybody here has read it.
Yes, but can we, from my memory, can we, the items that were sent, it was email correspondence, a CPW structural report, and then history, the
In
joiner
regards to
has.
what the plan.
Yeah, it was those three. Am I missing something that we were I'm trying to refresh my memory?
not that I'm aware of, Mr. Solomon.
Okay.
Those are the three items I think that the town also received, or I guess, and that's a good question.
I just wanted to, since it was an email, clarify that it was those three documents.
There was nothing slipped in that is different than those.
So if I may, Kevin Eichert, Director of Growth Management, those three items that were emailed to you, yes. So those are the three items that were emailed to you and provided to you. Just this afternoon, the applicant has provided some additional information. It's more narrative on his side, which he's going to be presenting himself. I did print copies of that, so you will have a copy. And Eugene, if it's okay with you, I'll wait until when he does his presentation, then we can hand that information out to you, not necessarily technical side of it, but just what he is presenting to you. You then have a paper copy of it. So.
And we can, but I guess what we're talking about right now is the additional information that was sent to us prior to this meeting and that we have copy of, and that's what we're kind of saying can we make that part of our,
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate Kevin coming up here and clarifying that as well, because you will be getting additional materials from
and
the
we don't,
applicant.
we can't do anything about that because we don't have it ourselves, so therefore, I guess our discussion is just on this part.
Yes, sir, Mr.
Correct.
Chairman.
Yeah. Does anyone have a issue making this part of the record?
No, sir.
No? And again, should we make a vote? Would it be better for
Yeah,
the
if you-
legal?
Just a motion to incorporate the 3 documents referenced earlier
Okay.
into the record, and all we need is a motion, a second, and vote.
And so therefore, I'm looking for a motion.
I so move to bring those 3 documents through to this agenda.
Looking for a second.
I'll second.
Looking for a vote. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So therefore, these are now part of the record. Thank you.
Sir, Mr. Chairman, and as to public comment, we can do this after staff presentations, after the applicant presentations, whenever you would prefer.
Normally, when would we have,
Typically after the application, after the applicant has provided their initial response to staff, is typically the way that we have it, but I can go ahead and we can do it now because
I guess what I'm looking at is that is a piece of paper that, in my opinion, is her. She's just not here, so if we were to do it, if she was here, that's when we would present it, or that's when she would be able to present.
under y'all's rules of procedure, yes, sir.
So why don't we just do it in that manner?
Okay,
That's, so let's see, we have Heather is it's not Katie?
Nope. I
You're
know,
gonna
I'm
be doing
confusing
it.
you, aren't I?
Okay, well, hello.
No,
Heather.
hello. Good evening. I know I typically don't attend the HPC meetings all the time, and let alone speak, but I did just want to take the opportunity to formally introduce myself. Haven't met all of you, met some of you in different venues, whether it's HPRC or other town events, but I'm Heather Cullen. I'm one of the assistant town managers, and part of that, I do oversee the Planning and Community Development Department. And then also one of my roles and responsibilities is as the UDO administrator. And that's, I just wanted to reference that because obviously that's where y'all's rules and regulations are established in the Unified Development Ordinance. So that's my role and my direct tie as to why I'm here. And again, just wanted to introduce myself. I also wanted to introduce this next item because it is a little bit different. It's the redevelopment, rehabilitation, preservation. I know those are lots of words and they all mean something a little bit different, but the overall project for the contributing structure. And we've had other contributing structures throughout time, but this is a fairly large project and unique in nature that we haven't seen in a number of years. So did just want to state that. There's a lot of information in your staff report because as such, we reference the Secretary of the Interior standards. And a lot of that is subjective. I will go ahead and just introduce that and state that for the record, where you'll see the words and you'll hear a lot as much as possible. And what much as possible is something that's to be determined by you all as the commission. And so staff has reviewed that and we have a lot of information there. There may be more additional information and you may be able to answer that question better with all of the supplemental information that's been submitted in between when the staff reports went out and certainly from the applicant and their narrative and their answers to your questions. So did just want to preface that and to introduce the project and myself to you all. So thank you.
Good evening, commissioners, again. The application that is before us this time is a certificate of appropriateness to allow the renovation of a 1,248 square foot contributing resource known as the Joiner House and to relocate the structure towards the eastern property line of the same parcel. It's identified as 9 Bruin Road, which is in the Old Town Bluffton Historic District and in that neighborhood core zoning district. So the orange was the neighborhood general we just heard before in the previous application. This is the corner of Bluffton Road and Bruin Road. In the neighborhood core HD zoning district. These are the photos that were provided as part of the narrative for the application. We have some trim work, a corner board here, the metal detail on the side portico, and then a portion of the eave and the metal portico. Additional photos that were provided, so this is the roof line with a window here, the sides of the house, as well as an example of a split rail fence that is proposed along the property line that you will see on the proposed site plan, or I'm sorry, landscape plan. It doesn't show up on the site plan here. So this is the proposed site plan. The previous location of the house is my mouse showing up on the screen? Yes, it is. So this is the existing location of the structure. They're proposing to move this structure to the right, which is towards the eastern property line here, and keep it at the same angle that it is currently sitting at. So it'll move from here towards the street up into that build to line, but at the same angle to this road as it currently sits. The floor plans are seen here. As you can see, this is the existing floor plan on the right-hand side, as well as the proposed floor plan on the left-hand side. So this is the proposed floor plan. I've added the little legend on the side here, which shows the existing framing, new framing, and contributing structure wall to be included here. So you can see those framing pieces along the edges of the floor plan here. This is the roof plan as well as a wall section that have been provided for us. And then details including the service yard, a column detail, and underpinning, as well as the porch underpinning details. So this is the underpinning for the most of the structure, and then the structure's porch here, because the porches are a little bit different than the primary mass of the structure. They've provided us a detail from Marvin Windows. So this is a fairly standard window detail, but this shows the proposed windows that they're putting in the structure, as well as some additional application material that was provided here. So this is measurements of casings and heads and stills for windows, as well as corner boards and porch trim and the eave. An additional document that was provided to us included these photos. So this includes a little bit of the narrative that was a second narrative here with some photos that show some of the details of the structure highlighted. And I've got them all kind of wedged on one page so that I could take up as few slides, but we could see as much information as possible. So if we need to slow down and look at one of those a little more closely, I would be happy to go backwards or forwards in this presentation to bring those back to the front.
Katie, can I ask you just to clarify the purpose of these photographs and what's been circled?
They're pictures that capture the comprehensive nature of the approach for deconstructing and rebuilding the exterior of the Joyner house according to the narrative. I'll let the applicant speak to that a little bit more than what it is here. The next one is the landscape plan. So I've got the full site's landscape plan here with the plant list key, but I have also zoomed in on the corner portion where most of that landscape installation will be done. So it has the new street tree as well as the foundation plantings that are being proposed along the sides of the new location. And then the canopy coverage, this does include the full site. So that fence that I was showing you on the previous screen shows up on this here to come around the back, wrap kind of around the structure and run along Bruin Road. And then this is that canopy coverage. So because the requirements for the plantings include the canopy coverage, foundation plantings, and street trees, where this development is taking place, most of the new landscaping will be in that corner because there are no other foundations to put those plantings around. So you see the canopy coverage for the whole site, but the planting plan is primarily this corner here. This is a certificate of appropriateness. So the 8 criteria which are found in section 318.3 are what you take into consideration as you consider the application. The HPC has the authorization to approve the application as submitted by the applicant, approve the application with conditions, or deny the application as submitted by the applicant. And staff has found the following items need to be addressed and request that you take them into consideration as you consider the application. And these are the same items that are found in the staff report, items 1 through 11 here. And so I can go through each one of them, or I can leave them on the screen for you to see and have the applicant speak to the application. Eugene and his whole team are here to speak on behalf of the application if you prefer.
Richardson, you know, this one's somewhat complicated, and as I'm looking at this, I'm just looking for a possible recommendation on There's a number of issues, and it all refers back to the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, and they are specific with the 10 items. So is having the applicant step forward in talking about these, or having, you know, I don't know if Katie needs to actually read these. I'm sure we've all read these, correct? I'm just checking. We all read these? So therefore, we kind of know what these are. So in reviewing this, I'm just looking for, would it be okay if we have the applicant come in and just say, number one, this, or I'm kind of lost on how to do this procedure correctly.
No, absolutely. What I would recommend, if you don't mind, is to allow the applicant, because we don't know how the applicant is prepared to, you know, present this, what you're recommending, addressing each one in particular, maybe the way that the applicant has plans to go ahead. But I would allow the applicant to provide their statement as to the project. And then when you have the discussion opportunity with the applicant, after the applicant gives their presentation, you can push the applicant on each of the individual items and the standards, which I think will be important, because a lot of them are subjective determinations, because they impose that standard of economic and practical feasibility included in all of those. So it's going to be I think that's probably the best way to go. Allow the applicant to present, and then if you feel like the presentation hasn't addressed each of those particular areas, maybe hit each one of those criteria, because it's all important.
How does the board feel in that? I'm looking for.
I think that I would personally like to hear the applicant speak their piece, but I would also like to hear the staff's findings read aloud.
Okay, so it becomes verbally out there.
Yes.
Okay. And that's something that you could do, Katie?
I can.
And so what we, normally what we do is we kind of review these, and sometimes we hit each one of them as we review it, but this time I guess we're going to be doing it a little differently, and just have her read through these and then go through the procedure if that's.
That sounds great. Given that there's 11 of them, I would say let's just run through them so that everything's out there in the air, it's been verbalized, and then the applicant can speak their piece, and then we can have just an open conversation with everything on the table.
I can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
That's Katie?
So the first few are from the Secretary of Interior Standards, which Section 318.3A of the Unified Development Ordinance says that the application must meet the requirements found in the Secretary of Interior Standards for rehabilitation. So rather than read 318.3 every single time, Rehabilitation Standard number 1, the structure should be moved intact or in as few pieces as possible to maintain the historic integrity. Rehabilitation criteria number 2 is to revise the relocation plan to leave the materials in place on the structure, maintaining the historic integrity regarding the design, materials, workmanship, and feeling of that structure. Rehabilitation standard number 3, the structure should be moved intact or as few pieces as possible, and any proposed new construction should be differentiated from the old to be compatible but not create the false sense of history on it with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features. Rehabilitation standard number 5, additional information regarding the proposed reconstruction of the front screen porch and side portico must be provided, as there was not enough information to ensure that they meet the standards of this section. Rehabilitation standard number 5, provide additional information regarding the ability to retain the historic windows and doors. Rehabilitation standard number 5, to salvage the materials, distinctive features, finishes, and construction techniques, and examples of craftsmanship that characterize the resource, the structure should be left intact or as close to intact as possible when moving it to avoid the loss of integrity. Rehabilitation standard number 6, a preservation plan detailing how the material will be cataloged when it's dismantled, which materials will be reused, including windows and exterior doors, and how the materials will be stored before it's rebuilt is required to determine if the standard has been met. Rehabilitation standard number 6, drawings for features which will be reconstructed, including the porch and side portico, must be provided for review as not enough information was provided to complete the review. Section 515.5F5 of the Unified Development Ordinance, a determination must be made by the HPC on the appropriateness of the placement, which is not parallel to the street which it faces, but does match the existing angle of the historic contributing structure on the site as it is. Section 515.6 of the UDO, to ensure the architectural standards have been met for the materials, dimensions, and configurations. Plans for all areas of the structure which will be dismantled and rebuilt or new construction must be provided to ensure that they're in compliance with that section. And then 515.6I, additional information is required regarding the proposed rear elevation, as not enough information was provided to ensure to complete the review of the proposed window in the location of the existing door. So they've changed the openings from a window to a door on the rear elevation. It's shown on the site plan, or the elevations here. So there's the window. It was a door previously.
Could you show me that again? I'm sorry.
So on the rear elevation, this is a window here. It is a door in the current configuration, which may not be an issue. We just don't have the elevations which show the proposed window size or location of that, or
Thank you.
size and opening size. And that was 11.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Katie. So let's see, that was the staff report. So Richardson, I take it, is this time to get the public comment read?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman. Right now, if y'all have any questions for staff, you're able to ask staff any questions that you may have, and in particular, ask any of their conditions or findings that they have. And if you have no comments at this time, but you would like to hear the applicant, this is when you would have the applicant come speak.
Okay. I say let's have the applicant come speak. If the applicant is here, and it looks like he is actually the owner of the property, I believe.
Hi, folks. Nice to be here.
Can you introduce yourself? And
Yeah, sorry. I'm Eugene Marks. My wife and I live here in Bluffton, and South Carolina residents, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm going to just say a few words, then I'm going to introduce my wife, which is always the smart thing to do, and we'll do that. Before we get started, just a broad comment, if you allow me. You know, if you were to kind of come in from Mars and kind of land in this room right now and not hear the words, but just kind of look at the setup, you would never guess that there's a group of people here trying to save a house on the lot that has a wonderful family history, and that you folks, even though you're so well paid and you do this for the money, you would be in front of us here trying to decide, like, what do we do? You know, there's a conflict, and that town council wants these things done, and that the community wants these things saved. And that, forgive me, I'm going to use his name, but it's a true story. I was out front at the property the other day, and Hank Carroll came up to me and said, "Wow, this is wonderful. I'm glad this is getting done." Now, if you don't know Hank Carroll, he usually isn't the most complimentary kind of bubbly guy. My point is, it's just, and we'll get to the substance of this, is I never thought it would be so hard to do a good thing. We've done it before, which I'll show you, but our hope is that we can come together here and say, this is a good thing. And good things don't have to be perfect, particularly when you're dealing with 100-year-old things, and you're dealing with state code, and you're dealing with common sense. But this shouldn't be so hard, because we all know we're doing the right thing. And so I just ask, as we go through this, that we kind of rise above and we just get to a point where we say, is this a good thing for everybody involved? I think so. Melanie thinks so. I'm willing to put money out that is going to be worth more than the building's going to be when it's done, because you got to put money in this you never get back. But let's find a solution, and let's not say this thing started in 2006 and then kick the can down the road. Please, let's find a way. We're here tonight. Hopefully before 9:30 we can say this makes sense, but you got to do these 2 or 3 things. That would be wonderful. Aside from us, the community who has to drive through that intersection every day and look at that thing and say, when are these people going to get something done? Well, we are those people. We are, and this is the moment. And why not? Is kind of the way I feel. So, forgive me. Josh, your point, the circles on those, when we were talking to staff, it's, well, we wanted something very specific on what you're going to get to. Like, it's a big project. Circle exactly where you think there's things that have to be fixed and moved. And I'll go through some of that in more detail. Mel and I have about 15 minutes.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Marks. If you could make sure to speak into the microphone, just in case we have anybody who's trying to watch online.
Okay.
And also,
This is a first for someone to tell me to talk loud.
and it's best, and then it's recorded, so that's the
Oh,
best.
okay. And I'm going to, Mel and I have about 15 minutes worth of stuff here. I'm happy to go through. I don't want to torture you with 15 different points, any redundancy. We'll go through it, and if you say you haven't addressed this enough, I'm happy to fill in the blanks. So, Melanie, and this is our project. Melanie's a professional in this field, and she'd like to just say a few things, and I think that it brings, what I hope this brings forth is a sense of passion and credibility, because this isn't just about plans and hard numbers and inches. This is about, do you trust the people you're going to let do this? Because when you open walls up on a building like this, I can't tell you what's going to happen, but I can tell you that when it's done, it's going to look pretty darn good. And I bet people in the community won't say that doesn't have the right, you didn't get that. No, they're going to say this looks wonderful. And that's our commitment. So Melanie is on historical boards. We raised our children in Connecticut where residents say, Melanie's on historical boards. She's on 2 of them. She's been on others too. So she has an informed opinion about that. She's not just on these boards, she's a liaison between these historical boards in the state of Connecticut for certain aspects of things. So she's, this isn't a hobby. This is her lifelong passion. She chairs the Demolition Delay Committee on one of the boards. Up there's a lot of old houses that aren't in historic districts that people just want to knock down because they want to build McMansions. A lot of the historical societies up there say, we can't stop you, but we can delay you for another 30, 60, or 90 days because we want to make sure we know what you're doing. She sits on that board, so there's a body of information understanding there. Just as it relates to Bluffton, because we're not carpetbaggers, we really are here. Melanie did all the research on the Garvin Garvey house. She donated 2 years worth of time. And Yankomito, a cemetery on Long Island, to look at a headstone for a military figure who was part of the family. True story. I didn't really want to go, but anyway, the report's on the town website. She did all that work. She also did all the research on Birch Church Distillery with Billy and the book and all that stuff. And then last, she's doing work on the Campbell AME Church now for that. So I call her the de facto Bluffton historian, and she loves it, and she has a few words, and then I'm just going to run through more of the detail, if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you.
Step forward and introduce yourself, please.
Wow, how do I follow that? Hi, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Melanie Marks, and we have been living in Bluffton for 12 years now. It is a passion of mine. I have been involved with preservation for over 25 years. I dabble in a lot of different venues, and I find it's important. And I think it's important for the community to save these structures. And I'm not going to sit up here and preach. I'm just going to read a small thing that I put together so that you can understand where I come from as far as my thinking. I would like to share my comments regarding my husband Eugene and my plans for renovating the Joyner House located at 9 Bruin Road, although I much prefer the earlier address of 132 Happy Street as it was known to the family. On June 30th, 2006, the town of Bluffton worked closely with consultants on developing the Old Town Master Plan. At that time, the consultants working on this initiative stated, while many buildings in Old Town have been preserved and restored, it is disturbing that some of Bluffton's most treasured historic structures, even some owned by the town, like the Garvey House, circa 1865 at the Oyster Factory Park, have been allowed to decline, fall down, and even burn down. Such structures are noticeable in Old Town and send a mixed message to residents and visitors alike about the community's feelings for historic preservation. We are attempting to make a difference and change that narrative by preserving the Joyner House. Having reviewed the video for the HPC September 1st, 2021 meeting regarding the application process for the Joyner Family Kessler Group and their proposal to demolish the structure, the question arose as to what criteria town staff were using to determine eligibility for the Joyner House as a contributing structure. Staff did not specifically state what criteria they were using. In reading through the Town of Bluffton's Unified Development Ordinance, the UDO, Section 3.25.3, which listed the 10 criteria that could be considered, in my professional opinion, technically only one of the 10 criteria might apply to the Joyner House. At present, the only criteria I can ascertain that applies to the house is that it meets the 50-year-old threshold, and possibly number 4, the structure exemplifies the cultural, political, economic, social, ethnic, or historical heritage of the town, region, state, or nation. Broken down, it represents an African-American structure built by a Gullah descendant. In any event, we've never had any reason not to preserve and renovate the structure since purchasing the property in 2022. In the past 20 years, my husband and I have renovated and restored 4 historic houses, a 1700 Dutch gambrel, one of the oldest in our town, a 1740 salt box that was once a tavern during the Revolutionary War. And yes, George Washington did indeed sleep there. A 1769 farmhouse, carriage house with original bank barn, and lastly, a circa 1929 house. We understand the importance of saving these structures for a community and future generations to come. It should also be noted that at that same meeting, the Kessler Group introduced documentation showing that 3 structural assessment reports had been completed on the Joyner House. On April 30th, 2021, Charles P. Walzak, president of CPW Engineering, did a site visit and rendered his report. He stated that 2 years prior to this report, he had also visited the site and rendered his professional opinion. He stated in his cover letter to the Kessler Group that he had, in quote, revisited the site and found the structure to be in the same, if not worse, dilapidated condition, with 2 years of additional wild growth partially swallowing a portion of the house. He went on to state in his report of April 30th, 2019, describes the various deteriorated conditions. In that letter, I conclude the building was beyond reasonable repair. It is not only a blight to the area, but it's physically not safe for occupancy. Entering the building would be hazardous due to its weak floor and wood framing, and because of these structural deficiencies, it would not be feasible to relocate it to another site. He went on to state that in his professional opinion, the structure was in hazardous, unsafe, unfit for occupancy, and should be demolished. We don't agree with the demolish of the structure. Eugene will further touch on Charles's more detailed assessment in greater detail as it pertains to our application and staff recommendations on relocating the structure. Fast forward to March 2022, when we purchased the property from the Joyner family. The property had been sitting idle for nearly 16 years and had fallen into disrepair and neglect. We knew what embarking on this journey would entail and the ins and outs of dealing with a structure that falls within a historic district. We were not deterred. After all, we had faced these same challenges when we renovated our 4 prior historic houses, as mentioned above. We have no intention of demolishing the Joyner House when we purchase the property, but have every intention of renovating the house, keeping it as the single-family home it has always been for nearly 100 years. It being the very house where Bertram Birdie, affectionately known by his family and friends, Joyner, and his wife Bessie raised their 11 children in the original part of the house, not the addition. Our plans for renovating the house is included in our application presented before you. My hope is that you, as a commission, will review our application as presented and arrive at a decision that will allow us to proceed with our plans of renovating the Joyner House for future generations to enjoy while visiting Old Town Bluffton, something the consultants of the town master plan back in 2006 stressed was of great importance to preserving Bluffton's Old Town heritage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin, I don't want to relegate you to the IT guy again, but this is not my strength.
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for the 2 slides I gave him about 2 hours ago. Oh, there we are. I've got it. That's it.
That?
Well, that's it. Well, I'll just click through these real quick. This is a historical report that Melanie did. This brings you, I think you've seen that. I'm glad it's part of, the record now. By the way, I went through the house and found that picture. The family was looking for pictures. I went through the bottom of a drawer that was in the section you don't want to walk in. I found those pictures and gave them to the family, and they were ecstatic. They didn't think there were any pictures. I'll go there. Thank you, Kevin.
Now,
Oh, there I am right there.
this-
Great. Okay.
This is the information that you're going to provide, tell me again, Richardson, is new information that we haven't seen yet, correct? So,
I'll go this way first.
I believe the information is this is the information I believe that was emailed to y'all.
no,
This is
something else. That's why.
this is his notes. These are your notes.
Okay.
No, so,
We've printed a copy and we can provide copies of it, but
and so I'm just asking, can this become part of the records?
Absolutely, it's in y'all's discretion.
Okay, just, I guess, want to make sure that we have this information
Yeah,
that.
and thank you for taking this, because our hope is that I can streamline this so that I can get to the salient points on the basis as we've built our essential story here around what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're going to do it.
So these are printed and we do have available copies for us? Is that correct? So this can become part of the record?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, and all we would ask is make sure that Carrie makes it a part of the record as well.
So Carrie, could you do we have to vote on that or anything?
That's sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, just making it 100%.
Okay,
Thank you.
Absolutely.
let me click through this. It was already referenced, the standards are implied. That first statement there, the standards are to be applied, specific rehabilitation projects in a reasonable manner, taking into consideration economic and technical feasibility. You've seen that. There's another aspect that I think is important here, and I should also have this in quotes because it's exactly as it's stated, but the Secretary of Interior standards and for the treatment of historic properties are regulatory only for projects receiving Historic Preservation Fund grant assistance and for other federally assisted projects. We're not looking for federal money, and
let me ask that. You know, I know that the town has provided a grant and such, so you're not going to be applying for that?
Well, I wasn't, when we bought it, we didn't plan on it. I shouldn't say that. When we bought it, it was being introduced. I'd be happy to go for it, but I don't have to. If in fact,
Then it puts it into a different category.
at least it puts it in a corridor of question. So if it's the council's statement that we're going to allow these few things, but you can't go for grant money, then that's fine. I'm looking for the greater good here. I'm looking down the road to get this thing done. I don't need the $30,000 or $60,000, to be honest with you.
And I apologize. Would rather not interject during the middle of the applicant's presentation, but from a legal perspective, the town's grant program is separate and distinct from any program that's being funded through the federal government. To the best of my knowledge, the town's program isn't funded through federal grant money. So the standards for federal grant programs don't necessarily apply for consideration to the towns. It's whatever the town application requires.
This was something I dug up myself, and I needed that clarification, so that's why I was interrupting. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Trying to be respectful of your time, but not go too fast. So the point I'm making here is I think it's just really clear. And there's a clear safe harbor here as it relates to your decision making, and I think as it relates to any consequence for the town. And council is here. I think you have the ability to use your common sense and say, we're looking at the facts and circumstances that are in front of us, and we respect the input from professionals, but we're going to make our own decision. And we can do that with clear conscience and without any collateral aspects that might come into play here as it relates to consequences of why or how. So let me just, so that's one point. I just want to bring to life, because we're talking about something here that at times is hard to imagine. Bear with us, and I just want to show you two of the projects that Mel and I did. because it's important to see the what. Now, this is a 1700 house. It was the last house we did. This house was really built in 1700. It isn't like rounding, like we think it was. Melanie did the research. You look at these names, they're really cool. 1700. I don't have the before, but I have the after. That house, and it's going to be similar to this. New windows, new front door, new side lights. A lot of the trim had to be redone. But that's the house. That was going to be knocked down. That was on the market for 3 years. The only reason we bought it is because it was next to our daughter. We moved in it. We redid it. And we moved to the other side of our daughter, but that's our problem. We have a moving problem. But that house, when you look at it, for the community, that's a success. That's a success. There's the back of the house. You can see that. You can see the addition, and we were respectful and so forth. This is the other one, and then I'll get into how we're going to do this. This is the Sherwood Whiskey Farm. We did this in 2007. This is the before. The window was taken out on the right there. They had a door in. They made this into a bed and breakfast? No. Yeah. The dormers on the top. I mean, this thing was on the market for 3 years, and the builders wouldn't buy it because they were worried they wouldn't be able to do anything with it, which is not unique, right? The builder's not going to buy it, and no one was as dopey as Melanie and I to say, well, maybe we'll buy it and we'll restore it. So there's the house. There's the other side of the house. This house sat on 25 acres. It was originally a 200-acre property. You can see this blacksmith shop on the left there, truly blacksmith shop. When we opened it up, we found horseshoes. We found things. That's the before. That's me in the hole as we're trying to redo the foundation. Again, this is a much bigger project. Holy moly, what do we have here? Then I'll show you, Melanie did the plaque, did the history, new siding, new roof. That's the house when we were done. Now, that is a common sense rebuild of a house. You can see the transom above the door was eliminated, just in terms of, this is not a game of perfection. The transom on top of the door couldn't have done because we had to put a floor joist, because as you redo the house, you have to do some things different. But the greater cause here of preserving that house, and we did the addition, we were allowed to do the addition. You can see, there's the picture of it from the top. We saved the horseshoe, we saved the blacksmith, we made that blue. The barn on the back is gorgeous. The beams in there are this big and they were hand hewn. We saved that, the original house, and so forth. The point we're making here is, and there's the family history. Sherwood Family Farm. The Sherwood family bought this in the 1700s. It was in the Sherwood family until Eliza passed away. Well, she sold it to the Whitskys. German immigrants living in New York, they made it into a bed and breakfast. They owned the house until 2006, and then we bought it. The main takeaway there, and I appreciate the time, is that's the quality we're talking about. That's what we're going to do. And we're going to do it to our best effort so that when people look at that house, when they turn that corner, when they see it, they're going to say, holy cow, look at that beautiful house. They're not going to say, sorry, there's a little something down here that isn't perfect. That's not the game. That's a game of diminishing returns, consternation, and decades of things deteriorating and falling apart. This is a game of practical, let's get it done and let's make it look good, respectfully. So I'd like to go now. There's just some more pictures. That barn is just killing. So let me go to what we're going to do here. This is the substance. This is the substance of what we're going to do and why we're going to do it. And I really am trying to make it as simple as we can go here. The process we're moving forward with here is based on the fact that this house is gone. I mean, the only reason this house is standing is because there's no insulation in it. Because if there was insulation in it, it would have rotted from the inside out. The front part of that house is rotted from the floor up because the carpet got wet. There's no insulation. You look up at the ceiling, you see the roofing panels screwed to rafters. There's no sheeting. The walls are frame, your side, your 1x6 V-groove, open space, drywall. The reason why that place isn't rotting because there's holes in the roof is because it's so porous. It's nothing. It's nothing, it's gone. So words matter a lot when you're an expert in this, and this is your education. So words are very particular. Are you renovating? Are you restoring? I'm just going to use common sense words that we all know. We want to replicate that house on the east side of the property. By the way, right next to Walter, who lives in that gray trailer house, Walter grew up in that. That's his grandparents' house. He is so happy to have this house put next to him. I mean, it could almost make me cry, which I don't cry, but he's so happy. Oh, Walter's, I don't know. He's got more years behind him than ahead of him. So what we want to do, and let me take this through here, and the end reserve is to preserve the external and the look and the feel. That's the game, the look and the feel. How can we have this look and feel really, really good? We have Pierce's plans, experts, big part of their business, high character people. We have engineering being done, and we have historic pier landscaping ready to go. We can't move this. You can't. And I don't know if you have enough information to understand that it really can't be moved. So what we're going to do is we're going to pour a new foundation to code. And that foundation is going to be a new perimeter foundation with piers. It's going to be code. Don't have to worry about hurricanes. You don't have to worry anything. We're going to have those posts, and we're going to take the brick off the existing posts, piers. And we're going to have the mason put them on so that when you look horizontally or front, those bricks on those piers are going to look exactly the way it looks now, except it's a new code compliant foundation. We're going to frame the walls to code. We're going to frame the floor system to code, and we're going to frame the trusses to code. The floor system is going to have subflooring, vapor barrier. The walls, again, rough house. We're going to put sheeting on. We're going to put vapor barrier. The roof on the trusses, we're going to put plywood, which isn't there, and we're going to put membrane. That's the new part of the house. So that's going to be sitting there, right? That's going to be framed. We all know it. You heard it said the roof and the rafters and such. Then, once that's done, we're going to bring in the roofers. Real time. We're going to say, okay, this week, folks, there's the old house and there's the green roof. There's the house over there with the sheeting and the membrane. Take them off, put them on. Start in the front and go to the back. And each panel, and this is not an old tin roof. This is I think it's a 5V. I should know that.
I believe so.
Thank you. You should know that too. Take them off, put them on. I expect that there'll be some loss. The roof is leaking. It's probably more the screw holes or something, but we're going to take them off methodically. And if there's a bad one, we'll take the other one, move it up, and we'll use as much of the roofing as we can and then the back of the house, which is not the historic part, if we need new material, we'll just use new material in the back. So that's the roof. So there's no need to tag, inventory and all that. It's going to come off and go on. So that's the roof. Then the difficult part is going to be now we have the siding, right? We have studs, sheeting, vapor barrier. We're going to go over to the house. We're going to say today's the front of the house, and the boards are going to come off because that's the only thing left. Because the house doesn't have insulation, and that's the only thing that is preserved. And if you want to go in, I'm happy to walk you through. You can't even walk through the front of the house anymore. You used to be able to, but you can't. But I'm happy to show you if you really want to get a sense of what this is. I mean, the pictures. You don't believe the pictures, I don't think you're going to believe what you see inside. Anyway, I think there's probably going to be 10 to 20% waste doing that. I mean, you can tell some boards are rotted. But we're going to do that, and we're going to use that wood, and it's going to have that, I'll call it a patina, although it's painted, but it's going to, I don't want to power wash that completely to make that look sterile like it's hardy. I want it to have a little bit of dust and stuff on it. We're going to do that, and then we're going to put in the new windows. Those windows in there are, when you saw the other houses we did, if you're going to build a house today as a family house, you have to put in new windows. I mean, to put in a single pane wood window, even if it has safety glass, it's just not logical. It's just not, so we're going to put in new Marvin windows. We're not going to go in there and use some lower, we're going to use Marvin windows which have the same look as the current windows. Then we put the siding on right, so we got the roof moved over, the siding has been moved over, the windows look the same, trim looks the same. Now we have the steps. We have these big masonry steps in the front and on the side. Mason comes back, and we're gonna try and take those apart as much as we can. Rebuild those. Take that off the side, put it over here. The front, put it over here. We did find a pile of brick about this big in the back of the yard that we have some extras, so we don't have to go to search for period bricks or anything. So we're going to try and make it look the same way. We're going to try and use the same exterior lights. These are jelly lights. You get them at they're Home Depot. They're jelly lights. We can replace those and so forth. Again, nice to code. As it relates to the porch, I think something said give us drawings of the porch. If we can take pictures of the porch from the side, and the front, and the other side, and inside in the ceiling, and I can show you those pictures. I don't know why I have to pay somebody to draw me something that you can see. Because our commitment is, see this picture? That's what it's going to look like. Why do I want to do a drawing of something I can show you? So I don't know why I'm going to do a drawing. You can see it. So in total, what you will see is original siding, piers that look the same, windows that have the same look, but yeah, they're going to be newer windows. Front porch, we're going to use the nominal lumber. Those are straight 2x4s. We're going to use the straight 2x4s. We're not going to use the new lumber. We're going to face nail the screen because it's face nailed. That's what it's going to look like. And everybody in the community, and Melanie and I and the team are going to be proud of what we've done. And people are going to be happy that it's done. So that's what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. And I'll just defer to you to lead me from here.
I guess, is it a question and answer time, or do we, I mean, again, I'm still confused on when we put this into the public comment.
Absolutely. So the best way to handle this is now you get an opportunity to ask any questions that you have of the applicant, anything that was raised by the presentation that they did, any questions that you have about the specific standards or the criteria, and make a response to any of staff's comments. This is your opportunity to get the information that you need from the applicant. And then after that, I can read the public comment into the record, and then you can give staff and the applicant a second opportunity to respond to that.
Thank you. Appreciate your guidance. I guess I'm going to reiterate, and sometimes I reiterate myself, and I apologize. I've been a salesman, and I understand sometimes people don't hear, but the point that you made, the Secretary of Interior Standards treatment, regulatory only, and just reviewing that once again is that you're not looking for federal grant money, because the federal grant money puts it into a whole different caveat, what I understand. So this is regulatory only, what I understand from actually doing my research too, and I've just uncovered that. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, and Mr. Chairman, I know I hate giving that answer, but what you found is correct, that it's regulatory only. The interior standards for preservation grants and funds from the federal government, but you also have under the UDO the criteria, and one of the criteria is conformity with the regulatory standards. So it does require you to consider the regulatory standards as part of the application for the Certificate of Appropriateness HD. And
but isn't this part of the standards, but this comment, because it's written in there, isn't it, somewhere in the standards? I'm just, because it's been quoted a number of times in other things that I reviewed.
Yeah, yes, sir. So that is part of the standard. So the economic feasibility, that language about the economic feasibility and the reasonableness, or are you speaking as to the 10 specific standards that staff has outlined in their report?
Yes.
Okay, so all of those are part of the Department of the Interior standards, the federal government standards. The reason that it's incorporated into staff's report is because the first criteria under the UDO for the consideration of a COFA HD, which is the application we're here for tonight, is for y'all to make a determination as to whether it complies with the standards set by the Department of the Interior, which are those 10 standards. So if you look at, in particular, if you don't mind going to the staff report, it's section 3.18.3A, consistency with Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation and guidelines. And again, it's consistency, so it's subjective. It doesn't have to be maximum. This isn't a.
It is subjective.
It is
The word
subjective.
you used is subjective, so that's key, I think.
And again, the standards are about applying this in a reasonable manner, taking into consideration the economic and technical feasibility. The reason that we're kind of harping on some of these issues tonight is this is a relatively unique project before the HPC. This is not a application that y'all get very often, and so we're interjecting a little bit more than we normally do because it's going to be complicated and it's an important project. So we want to make sure that we're here to guide you as much as we possibly can, but allow y'all to make the decisions you need. But again, yeah, Mr. Chairman, it is about taking into consideration the economic and technical feasibility, which interjects another subjective standard into it. So
I guess I'm going to have a questions regarding that precedent. You know, I push the word precedent all the time. I was reviewing some of the other previous projects, and it seemed like there has been some previous precedents, such as the Methodist Rectory or whatever the name of the house is. I apologize for not knowing it. But isn't there some precedent set already on some of the items that have been done on other previous projects?
Is this working? Yes. Okay, so Mr. Chairman, there are other projects that have gone through the process of a severe renovation, including the Graves House, which is the one you're talking about there, as well as the Garvey House,
And that's only two?
the Square Folk Carriage House is currently in the process of going through that process. The Pine House, which was well before my time here in Bluffton, went through another process that was similar to it. However, I don't know the details of the Pine House because I was not here when that project came before the HPC or the town. The information that is being requested when we're taking a structure and putting in the new framing is how that process is going to look. So and a lot of the information that has been provided in the emails that you all incorporated into the record tonight speaks to some of that. Drawings of things that are going to be new construction. Those are the items that are what we're looking for to ensure that the Secretary of Interior standards, as well as the other 6 or 7 criteria in section 318.3 are met, because there just wasn't quite enough information with the initial submittal to address all of those items.
So what are we missing?
So I could just jump in if that's all right. So I will say, like, Katie was exactly right. That's why I wanted to introduce this project. And again, like Mr. Marks stated, those words matter and the details are very different, like rehabilitation, preservation. So the project, the rehabilitation project of this, it's a contributing structure, and this is the first one, to my understanding, although there's been significant projects and the rate contributing that rate. There was another one that I wasn't sure if that one was contributing or not, the rate as well. So, but this is one of the bigger projects since the Garvey House and the Graves House, Garvey House, lots of G's and R's and B's, sorry. But, and I want to also just try to answer your question about precedent. Yes, that is a term and that's something, but also remember each project does stand on its own and is reviewed on its own. So that's my non-legal, but my planner in me response to that. So I would focus on this project because it is different. All the projects are different. The criteria is the criteria, and it's the same. We have not reviewed a project since I've been here, or staff, with the UDO requirements that are outlined in that staff report. And that's why I said, yes, it is the bulk, and it's a lot of information, and there's a lot of subjectivity, regulatory language, guidelines. But again, there's all that information in the staff report. As far as what's missing, there are some things that are outlined and some things that have been presented today that I'm like, oh, that sounds like a preservation plan, and we're getting more information, which is great and very helpful, I think, when reviewing it, and to give you that information to make the determination. So apologize if that sounded a little bit rambling, but as I'm sitting here and taking it all in, like trying to help, again, be respectful of everyone's time and just make those couple statements. And again, that's kind of why I wanted to introduce the project and kind of lay it out at the beginning.
And just simply, as far as precedent, to echo Ms. Collins' comments, each application is on its own, so in particular with subjective determinations. So just simply because you have agreed to allow a 2,800 square foot structure in one location doesn't mean that you're required to allow that same 2,800 square foot structure in another location, because massing and scale is a subjective determination. What happens tonight is not necessarily going to dictate what happens in future applications. This is about applying the criteria and using your best judgment to determine whether the criteria has been met or whether it needs to be approved with conditions or denied, because that's your authority tonight. So you have those three options. After applying the criteria, hearing the facts, listening to the applicant, listening to the public comment, and using your best judgment and your experience.
If I could add, words matter, especially when it comes to this. When we get to the Secretary of Interior's, and there are 4 treatments for dealing with historic structures: preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, and reconstruction. The biggest, I like the idea of salvaging the aesthetic of this structure. I like the idea of salvaging this structure. And to your point, of the criteria that it falls under, which qualified it to be a contributing structure in the first place, its date and its ownership are the 2 prevailing contributing factors. Understanding the structural integrity of the structure or lack thereof, and the difficulty in relocating it, what we're calling, in my opinion, a rehabilitation, it's not a rehabilitation. We're talking about building a new foundation in a new home and then skinning it with a veneer, utilizing resources removed from a contributing structure. I feel that the biggest fault we can make as a committee, as a board, is going down a path where we set a precedence of labeling something that is not a rehabilitation as an approved rehabilitation. So asking for approval to replicate a historic contributing structure in the process that you've outlined here, to me it speaks more in keeping with the intent as defined by those opportunities: preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, reconstruction. Reconstruction is defined as the act or process of depicting by means of new construction the form, features, and detailing of a non-surviving site, landscape, building, structure, or object. So by building that new home right beside the existing joiner home, and then when we get to a point where you're ready to put the exterior siding on and then taking those components off, it's not rehabilitation. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that words do matter, and what we have to navigate is interpreting the UDO on behalf of the town of Bluffton. And yes, everybody wants to see this done well, and they want to see it done promptly, and you're not doing anything bad, but we have other precedences that what we set here are going to follow. So
But council just said precedent is, there is no precedent. Everything's case specific.
To a degree, though.
Well, Josh, so I don't disagree with you. I'm not good on the words of, I'm just telling you what we're doing. What is the, so if I want to solve that, what do I need to do so
So the
that you
hang-up-
say it fits in the right category? I'll be respectful of that.
For me, the biggest hangup is the fact that the UDO states that we have to abide by the Secretary of Interior's, and the fact that this is being called a rehabilitation. Now, we can't look at what the Secretary of Interior's calls a rehabilitation and then look at this proposed new construction with utilization of an existing exterior. They don't overlap.
So I understand. How do I solve that? Do I change the word in the application? I'm trying to say, I don't disagree with you. Yeah.
I agree with Josh as far as the problem with the precedent is that this is submitted under a restoration and rehabilitation, but it is new construction and it is not, I think that's a slippery slope to go down when you use the word replica, because replica is not the same thing. And I think that using those terms interchangeably becomes very foggy.
Amanda, when we pick that word of,
I would think that you would need to have it removed from the list and then reuse those materials as you want. But I don't think that this is restoration.
One of the things, too, that we're navigating right here is, in essence, if we were to grant it approval as it's outlined right now, in essence, we're granting demolition of that home.
Right.
How about if we,
I don't disagree. I'm looking for you to tell me what is an issue and then
Here's
help
my-
me solve the problem.
could we use the word reconstruction? Because you're reconstructing, or is that saying you're building new?
You know, this is where I look for guidance from the powers that be within our township to make sure that guys that are alive. I mean, I do have experience with working under architectural observation and performing historic preservation. However, this gentleman right here eats, drinks, and breathes that stuff. So I don't want to outline a path for you when there is a smarter person in this room that can assist us in navigating that path. But I'll say this, all right? So in what's been proposed and what's before for us now, there's just a few things that I key in on. I would like to see, of the contributing structure portion of this home, I would like to see the existing windows and doors reglazed and kept. The Graves Cottage on the corner of Allen Street and Calhoun Street, the existing historical 1908 windows are all single pane. They were reglazed.
Which house?
Could I add to that? I think that there's really only 2 windows in there because the others have been replaced recently from broken or going and buying a Lowe's window or something. And I think there's really only, if I understand, there's only 2 actual
Can't
historic-
tell. I mean, the
historic
inspection
windows in
said
there?
that the front aren't original. I mean,
The
they're,
front aren't original either.
I mean, I didn't.
It says they can't establish as to whether or not they are original.
Josh, would you put in a house with a family $600,000 with single pane windows? Would you do it with your money? Knowing what we're trying to
I
accomplish?
put my pastor and his family in a house with single pane reglazed windows.
And you can do that for code? That passes code? Would Richard Spruce allow that?
Yes, sir.
I just have a question as far as precedent and the Garvin House, knowing the construction that took place there. I know a lot of the materials for the Garvin House were reclaimed. Most of the windows are brand new. There were, I think, only 2 windows in the Garvin House that were original. So, you know, when we talk precedent and we talk about the Interior, Department of Interior's requirements, we're looking at a structure that is beyond comprehension as far as picking it up and moving it in big chunks over to the east side of this property. And the problem I have with it is you're asking us, and I'm just saying this theoretically, I'm not saying it to you in a negative way, to take a structure that has 3 structural assessment reports done on it that says it's beyond repair. And you're asking us to bring this building in pieces, in big pieces, to this site and put it on the same piers, the same framing, the same everything.
I'm sorry, but that's not what I've said.
No, but that's what is in theory is what we've been
that.
tasked with in the listing.
I'm not proposing that, and no one up here is proposing that.
No, but it's in the recommendations that we remove the house in big pieces over to here.
And
That's
we've
based
read
on
those
your-
recommendations.
But to use the same materials that are beyond repair.
Can I just interject? The comments in the staff report are there because in the narrative that they provided, they're going to relocate and rehabilitate the structure.
And that's where we meet a crossroads that
So it's the language
has
that
been
we
written in a
presented
manner
in the
that we have to
application of what
respond.
we were
Words
doing.
matter.
Sure.
So we need to go back and say, what? That we want to build a newer frame, use existing material that we can, or we have to move the structure that's beyond repair over here?
I would do the relocation or demolition.
What's been provided, like this is the best starting point. That it is a narrative that's more aligned with what's going to happen, what's being proposed. The actual submittal doesn't speak to the truth of the matter that is actually going to happen there. And rehabilitation is not what we're talking about. It's not a rehabilitation.
So I guess I'm trying to understand. So we don't want to demolish the building. We want to preserve the building, but to take a structure that has been deemed.
We're not disagreeing with you on that, though.
Yeah, but I guess that's where my dilemma is that, okay, our application doesn't speak on what we're asking to do. That I understand, and that can be addressed. But to use this structure that has been deemed in deteriorating state and to use every aspect of it that we can over here just doesn't make sense to me.
Well,
And we're not saying it does. So please, I understand.
So I guess that's my dilemma is how do you get around that?
How do we get something talked about or discussed that would allow this project to move forward in a positive manner in what's been outlined here, understanding that there might be a word that's needing to be changed, but for me to have this whole process started again for a word doesn't seem like it's fair to the applicant.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can just, you'll give me a little bit of a moment here.
Yes, please.
Afford me the privilege of, if you don't mind, the public comment.
Yes.
If we can incorporate that, because what we're doing now is we're kind of getting more into the open discussion portion of the HPC and talking about what your potential decisions might be. And what I'd like to do is public discussion, and then if I can somewhat take the floor and see if we can't, if I can't try to get a little bit more information from y'all as to what you're looking for so that we can appropriately guide the applicant without requiring them to, obviously not start from scratch. But what can we do to make sure that we expedite this process? Because it does sound like, and I'm just picking up on what I'm hearing. I haven't spoken to any of you before about this project, but obviously it's not a question of the motivation of the applicant. It's not a question of the capabilities of the applicant. It's a question as to the technical aspects of the application and whether there was enough detail provided that you feel comfortable approving this because of the issues it could have down the line with other applications. And also the terminology that was used does not necessarily reflect what the application states. So if you'll just give me a moment to allow me to do the public comment portion.
Thank you.
Yes.
And then we can ask and I can start taking notes and hopefully we can get to a reasonable resolution that everybody's comfortable with.
Thank you for your guidance.
Are we ready for public comment?
We certainly are.
I'm going to apologize to Ms. Hayward because I will not do near justice to this comment, but Joan M. Hayward, 95 Boundary Street. This was submitted in writing, and unfortunately, she cannot be here tonight to deliver it. In 2004, 2005, Tommy and I undertook the rehab of the Pine House. The Pine House was in deplorable condition. We worked through the State Historic Preservation Office, and the process was amazingly easy considering the condition and size of the house. We absolutely went beyond the standards. Now we have before us the Joyner House and following it, Kiki Cleveland's house on Wharf Street and the Deer Tongue building. I read the application online for the Joyner House. From my reading, it seems all of the rules are being followed. As happened with the Pine House, great consideration is being made for converting to this century, utilizing all parts of the house available. I plead with you to consider our historic district and the few historic homes we have available for rehab. Private citizens are stepping forward to undertake these projects. This is a plus for our district, and we need to accommodate them and work with them in a way that encourages others and promotes preservation while at the same time being financially feasible. These structures tell the story of Bluffton and must be saved to the best of our ability. I am personally working with Kiki Cleveland, and it seems she is receiving roadblocks instead of encouragement. She is a young woman, grew up in Bluffton, and wants to rehab her family cottage. Her project will be later. In closing, I plead with you, the members of the HPC, to look at the entire picture of the Joyner House, the Joyner family, the property, a place where members of the community of Old Bluffton grew up and the history this structure tells of Bluffton. Let's work together to tell our story and preserve the history and heritage of Bluffton. Thank you for your consideration. I'm not sure if there's any other public comment, so I'll Mr. Chairman, or?
Are there any other public comments that I'm aware of? No? Okay, thank you.
So moving forward, trying to think of what is the best process and the path. So one thing I do think we need to hear, and Commissioner Simpson, Commissioner Boxbell have started to kind of express their concerns with the project and what information that they would like, or at least what they think need to be addressed by the applicant prior to being able to get that approval. I would appreciate if, obviously, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Solomon, Mr. Smelter, if y'all would provide any comments that you have as well, so we can try to put those together and see what we can do to try, again, move this forward, not necessarily backwards, or at the very least, to see if we have to table this application or if there is a decision that could be made tonight. So I think we first need to get that information. So if you don't mind, I'd like to turn it over to y'all.
And I think
and I'll take notes.
That would be great if we, if you would like to make some comments, and I guess maybe we'll just come down the line if that's all right. And, if there's any additional information that or input or ideas or what you're viewing.
I'm personally thrilled that they wanted to now I'm careful what I want to say, but to
Do what they're doing.
do what they're doing. It's wonderful that this structure that is, Old Town Bluffton is going to not be necessarily restored, but, whatever. I think it's fantastic. It's, I mean, maybe just need to figure out different wording or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Josh, I think you really hit like the overarching problem. I could not have said that like that. I mean, to me, when I was going through the UDO and the Secretary of Interior Standards, I mean, the UDO, we are supposed to consider that from the UDO, and this, I guess, additional information that we're seeing today with the narrative talking and you explaining, Mr. Marks, the process was a lot more clear than originally just seeing the full application and mostly the floor plan. I think For me, this is kind of, or slightly getting off topic, but one of my big concerns was I have no hesitation with the team that you've assembled and y'all that you would do an amazing job. My problem is these applications are not like an RFQ, like a request for qualifications. They're for, I mean, we have to actually see, I do think we need to see a little bit more. Since I've been on the board, whether it's been a minor renovation or whether someone's adding a bedroom, we've always seen all four sides, the elevations of the home, especially when we're talking, it was hard for me to follow with the narrative. We're talking about replacing windows with a door. I think a lot of the, well, I won't say that. Some of the comments from staff, I feel like would be solved with just a little bit more information. And for me, it was, the elevations of the buildings, or at least if it was straight on views of each of, from pictures, actually like explaining what you were saving or preserving. I guess that was my, every application that we've received, we've always had plans. And yes, we have the sections and we have detailed floor plans, but so that was the main thing that was missing for me. Something concrete was those elevations.
I guess it's my turn. I'll go forward. I guess what I'm looking at this is sometimes these the standards are written in a sense for museum context, and this is a contextual type building. I see that some of the outlines that they ask for is good documentation, careful, thoughtful, with integrity. Those are some of the words that I was looking through, and again, trying to do my homework. This is something that I wanted to make sure I was caught up on, but I view that in the information that we were given, and again, just as this is now part of the applicant's, correct? This has become part of it.
Yes, sir, Mr.
So I
Chairman.
just wanted to make sure that that's true. So we do have a process, and we do have something that he has to follow if proceeding forward.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. If y'all approve this, this is the process. This is what they've outlined, just like with any other application.
Okay. Going back to the fact that I'm saying that, we're not looking for federal grant money. I think that's key, because this is regulatory only. Help me.
They're not eligible for federal grant money.
Okay, so therefore so this becomes the word regulatory only. And the standards, I think the information that you provided, Mr. Marks, is, standards are to be applied to specific rehabilitation projects, reasonable manner, taking into consideration economic and technologically feasibility. I feel that everything, in my opinion, is being met. One of the things that I really like about this project is this is being brought forward to the street more. It's not being presented in the back. This is going to be a project on a corner, and it's going to look like it had. Everything that I hear, it's going to be replicated. I don't know what we want to, replicated, whatever word we want to use. No one's going to be able to tell. The material is going to be reused. It's not going to have to be listed and marked, because they're just taking it off of here, putting it over there, taking it off here, putting it over there. So they don't have to store it. They don't have to do anything. And there's not that much really to salvage except for the box. And the box is broken. The box is deteriorated. I'm just calling it a box. And they're going to just put stuff on the outside of the box and on the top of it and make it look exactly like it was when it was first built. Screens are going to be the same manner and everything else. So I guess I'm kind of looking at this is how do we get this project so that the applicant could have something and walk away and proceed forward. I guess that would be, to me, something good for what we're doing today.
I want to start by saying I think that it sounds fantastic, and I love everything you're doing and the projects that y'all have done. And not to get into semantics, but what you just described is not restoration to me. And replication is new construction in my mind. It is not restoration. So that's the only problem with precedent I have, is that when you start taking these buildings and replicating them, then you're going down a slippery slope. But I don't doubt the condition of the house. I've been there on site, and I don't doubt that. And I don't doubt that it is completely illogical to try to move it in its state. But I just don't think that you can say you're restoring and preserving a house when that's not what you're doing. And then we're going to be held to that standard going forward with homes that may be able to do that.
I was just looking back through the UDO to see if it spoke to a replication process. Doesn't, does it? So, I mean, I've said,
Chairman and Josh, just quickly, a replication process, replicating would be new construction using green or reused materials, so it would follow section 318.3 for new construction if it were to be a replication.
Is it all right if I, with the word replication, I think we're in agreement with that. How can we proceed forward and utilize, it truly is a replicate to the exact dimensions and roof and window, and, it's done pretty, what I understand, pretty accurately.
But it's still new construction.
And I would just to have a conversation about that. I mean, for me, for instance, you're exactly matching the windows with these new windows? I mean, I would need to see, I would need to see those elevations too. I mean, it sounds after, I don't know how the rest, I mean, it sounds like, from the definitions in the UDO, it is a demolition, a sensitive demolition, I would say, and then building a new structure and replicating that with that. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to kind of, and I'm sure the applicant's going to want to respond to some of this. I'm sure staff's got some comments as well. But before so I can kind of organize, I would like to see if Commissioner Simpson has any other comments about this, so I can just try to organize these best I can.
so thinking along the lines of performing a new construction replication of the Joyner home circa 1960. I mean, in essence, that's maybe a good summary of what we're talking about here. Given what we have before us, here's my feedback on that proposed design. I'd like to see the entry door kept. I'd like to see the existing windows within the contributing portion of the structure kept and reglazed, and because that's going to make that aesthetic true. It's going to make that aesthetic read true. The Marvin windows, they're great windows, but they're not going to replicate that single pane true divided light, which is what is there now. I'd like to see the original or the existing steel columns that are on that side porch kept. I think that, again, that's the tangible components that there's not a lot to it, but it's a part of it. The pier design. So it's not possible to take a 8-inch CMU and wrap it with 4-inch brick or a 12 by 12 and get a replicated 12 by 12 pier, which is what's there now. Eugene, this is something that I encountered personally in working to build a home that replicated a circa 1930s Bluffton cottage. So there are structural details that aren't here that are going to be required for the building of that new home. You could take a 12 by 12 CMU and you can cut the existing brick and apply those to a 12 by 12. And with packing out that CMU wall, allow that siding to go right across the face of the brick. That can be done, but what's drawn is not going to replicate what's in the photographs. So that pier detail.
I thought, forgive me, Josh, did we spend time on that? On that? But I'll let you continue because
But just, 12 inches by 12 inches, working to get a piece of threaded rod through there and into an exterior wall, that's going to be encountered through the structural design process, and I flagged that. And then the only other concern, which really we can't speak to color, is any of the panels of the roof that have to be purchased new, the amount of fading that's existent on the current roof, just utilizing any new panels on the back right side of the property so that it's not seen from the street.
Or we could try and use some muriatic acid and tint them.
I would caution against that because you can't stop it once it starts. But aside from that, it's just, for me, it's a wording item, and if we aren't cautious about how we approach the wording and the approval of this, then it's opening a door for other interpretations.
Thank you, Commissioner Simpson. Now that I have y'all's notes, what I'd like to do is step aside and, Mr. Chairman, if you agree, to allow the applicant an opportunity to speak or staff to speak as to any of these particular issues. And maybe we can find some that they're in agreement to that can be conditions imposed, or we can figure out if there are certain issues that can be delegated to a staff level review and don't have to come before the HPC. So if you don't mind, I'm going to step aside and just kind of review these notes, look at everything, and then I'll be back to address these issues with you on what we need to do.
Again, thank you for your guidance on this.
Yes.
It's always good to talk. And so I appreciate and respect your perspective. And if I could just, Josh, I think we can, the engineer's already, the structural's already doing stuff, so we can, that's a good, I understand, I respect, and will respond. If that's it, I need to have a better section of the piers. That makes sense, because I want it to look the way it does. And if you're viewing what we've done here with your expertise as we can't get there from here, then that's something that we will give you. The windows, I don't, maybe because I've been there and I'm trying to move them and I know that there's not, could I ask that you say use existing or replace with historical versus just a newer version, historical quality of window that has the exact style and so forth, as opposed to those? I'm not so much, I think it'll look the same and it'll be historical quality. It'll be exorbitantly expensive, but it'll give you that look with a new window. So I don't think I can reglaze. Those are the equivalent.
And when it comes to the restoration of a window such as that's in such bad shape, there's going to be components of it that wood putty's not going to fix. I mean, there's going to be components that milling and new parts and pieces, would be required. So when I say keep the existing windows, what I mean is restore, the existing windows to keep them as like kind as possible.
So would you say that you would say one of the conditions is to try and retain or replace with historic quality Marvin Pella?
I've walked through the house, and from memory, I don't remember seeing any type of jam liners or anything that would lead me to believe that it's not a weighted sash window. And if it is in fact a weighted sash window, then there are artisans in our area that I've worked with in the past that can do a full restoration. They can take those panes out, they can take them back to the shop, reglaze them, put historic glass in them, bring them back, fix the weights, and
Well, I'm not going to, I respect your experience with this. I respect your experience. I'm not going to try and negotiate your position. I'm just doing that. I just want to be respectful of what Josh said. The other aspects, and I guess, Mary, this gets to yours. I understand that we might not have used the right terminology because this could be a number of things. And so I don't know how we address that, but if this is more clearly defining the what, and then we can follow with let's define the what, and then these are the conditions that we'd like because we've changed the what, that I understand, and that makes a lot of sense, at least to me. And I think it gets back to just your thing on the windows. The challenge I have is I understand that. What I don't want is for you to say, I'm not comfortable with this, and for us to say, but we want to do something, and I don't know what it is. And I know at times it's difficult for you to tell us the what, and that's where I don't want to leave here with this. You want something different, and we want to do what works, but you don't want, if you follow what I'm saying? Yeah. So for you to say, I need the windows, I need the piers, and I need the doors, and I want the metal, if those are the things, I get it, I can do it, and I might not like it, but then I understand.
And I would say that, Jesse, perhaps, given the fact that there are elements such as the casing and the windowsills and such that are going to be replicated, they're going to, maybe that's a staff approval that those profiles could be brought in and staff could approve that, or a window submittal could be provided to staff that is, the Muntons and such are selected to complement the existing windows as best as possible. If a motion were to land that included keeping the original windows in the contributing portion.
If the original windows were kept in the contributing portion, then yes, I would have no qualms with not seeing an elevation that's drafted, for sure.
And we're getting to, that's a topic that I've never seen before us before, which is, in essence, it is submittal of components for approval, not a bunch of them, but even if it's one element. I ask, who does that go before as it relates to staff? And what would that look like for Eugene?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
Could you restate that? Sorry.
As he's stating, he's looking for direction and how to proceed forward in his direction. So if the window, who at staff level is going to approve the window design, the sash design, who's going to have that arbitrated viewpoint on it?
Well, I will say that there's some options. I mean, depending on where this discussion goes and the direction, Richardson, Mr. LaBruce and I were discussing what the options are and to assist with those words and how to fit this within the UDO. Ultimately, I'm the UDO administrator. I take advice from technical staff who review these all the time as far as what the documents are. We have a lot of opportunities to get more information in those conditions like Mr. LaBruce stated at the beginning, whether it's window plans and drawings and specifications or elevations. So I don't want to, I'm not in the position to make that decision, so I don't want to necessarily advise you as to which one you should do, but there's options as far as the conditions that you can put on that as far as staff have additional information. And ultimately, staff, and I don't want to come up here and say, like, it's me, I'm in charge, I'm the UDO administrator, but technically that's my role. But I take advice and information from staff, from you all as a commission. Primarily, it's your decision and your recommendation. So, but ultimately that's how it works. But again, I don't make my decisions in a bubble or work in a bubble and meet all the time with
But Glenn, you're a
those that
resource
can
for
be.
that.
So,
I mean, you're a preservationist. So that, I would suggest that if it came down to those type of decisions, that we would look to the expert.
right, and that's why I didn't mean to say it's me. These are the experts, and this is there's ultimately just how it all
You're
works.
getting information from
Yes.
people, but you actually made the decision.
Yes, and you all as well as commissioners on the Historic Preservation Commission. So we also have the HPRC where you all provide comments and things like that. So we have mechanisms in place where we can get that additional information and make those decisions, however it may be. And I don't know if there's some options to include some of you on the review of additional information as it moves forward. I think we've done that in the past.
Well, you
So
can
there's
bring-
options.
You can submit it back through HBRC, and that way you have that body, which, just gives input.
All right, so let's say that we find a path forward. Next steps inevitably would be the submittal of a permittable set of drawings. So, there will be a set of plans that has to be provided to the town of Bluffton for a building permit. There would also need to be a demolition permit applied for the removal of the Joyner property.
The remnant of it.
The house as it stands right now.
If you did that, then you wouldn't have to come back and forth with the windows and the.
So if we
Do
were
you
to,
think a lot of that could be clarified with a more comprehensive set of plans, saying we are going to use the original window at this position and the elevations and that type of thing? Is that what you're saying?
well, I'm stating that what we're looking at is not the set of drawings that this is going to happen by. There will have to be a permit filed for a new home on this piece of property to receive the components of the Joyner house that are going to be repurposed. And for that property to be taken down, in essence, I would assume that a demolition permit would have to be filed for that home and the foundation and the walls and et cetera to be taken down after the roof and the siding and the brick have been utilized.
Since we're saying it's a two-step process, what you're really looking at is building the new structure. As the new structure is being built, you're removing items from the old structure, but then you have a shell, and something has to be done to that shell, and you have to have a demolition for the shell that's left.
Yes.
So
And what I'm,
is that correct?
So I'd like to defer to the UDO administrator on this because she's going to be Heather's position is also as assistant. She's also an assistant town manager who's heads up our growth management department, but is also building department. Pretty much everything.
So what's the process?
Well,
Yeah, so
just half.
I think you're bringing up
Not
a
even
great, what's the process that has to be taking place here?
So-
The true process for you guys.
Okay, so we're talking, it sounds like we're talking about a couple different things. We have the COFA and how it's going to be classified and worded for the certificate of appropriateness, and then we're getting in kind of the weeds with the building permit. Now, typically, and I know some of you, Commissioner Simpson, I know you are especially involved with when building and things like that, when it's a partial demolition, and then you're also rebuilding and developing it back. Typically, we would just capture that in one building permit. We wouldn't issue a demolition permit and then a subsequent rehabilitation, renovation, miscellaneous building permit, whatever you want to call it. Typically, we would capture it all in one if it's all happening as part of the same project and the steps. Now, which this property already went through demolition, permit to demolish some of the structures as was approved in the certificate of appropriateness. That's all that was being done. So that's all. And actually, I think some of the sizes didn't even quite reach the thresholds to get there. But if you're just demolishing and you don't know what you're going to do and do anything back, it's a demolition permit. But typically, we capture it all in one permit, one building
Thanks for
permit.
clarifying. That makes it,
Sorry, as I was sitting there, we're talking, it's.
So it could be
Lots of
listed all in one permit?
It
and
could
that's
all,
the
yes.
tag that they have in the front? and
Yes,
that's
again,
all
that's
gonna get
typically
done.
what we've done. We don't, because that's the whole project, so rather than segment it
Right.
into individual permits.
Can I ask a question? I was just getting from my counsel something that's quite relevant.
Microphone, please.
This is from the U.S. Department of Interior Natural Park Service, which we've referenced before. Standards for reconstruction. Reconstruction will be used to depict vanished or non-surviving portions of a property when documentary and physical evidence is available to permit accurate reconstruction with minimal conjecture, as such reconstruction is essential to the public understanding. Reconstruction will include measures to preserve any remaining historic materials. Reconstruction will be based on the accurate duplication of historic features and elements substantiated by documentary or physical evidence. A reconstruction property will recreate the appearance of non-surviving historic property in materials, design, color, and texture. Reconstruction will be clearly identified as a contemporary reconstruction. That sounds like doesn't it sound like what we're doing? This isn't my words.
so the Secretary of Interior, they define preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, and reconstruction.
So that's allowed?
Yeah, so I'm just saying, that sounds pretty close to what we're saying,
Much
isn't it?
more than rehabilitation.
Your application is for renovation, rehabilitation.
But
not
not
reconstruction.
demolition or anything, right? So you're
if we
saying,
use the word
so would you agree that what we're doing here is reconstruction?
Yeah, I mean,
So we're agreeing with that, right?
Yes, that's,
by that
I think
definition.
where you're confused. It's the
Me?
wording, well,
That's
no, this
okay.
is accurate, no. It's the wording on our application, that we have rehabilitation instead of reconstruction. And if we can follow these parameters for reconstruction, we just need to change the wording on our application to say reconstruction and not rehabilitation. Is that correct?
that clears, rehabilitation has to go away.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the
Renovation has to
process
go away.
for, do we have to start from scratch and resubmit, or can we just
I would
change the
ask-
wording?
Well,
I hope I don't confuse things more, but help get us to where we want to be, because it does sound like we're largely in a consensus as to the project and as to.
It's when you go back again for your
318.3. Thank you, Katie. That's kind of thrown me off, sorry. I think part of the issue with the use of the word rehabilitation versus reconstruction has to do partially with the UDO. In comparison to the federal regulations, they're going to be dozens, if not hundreds of pages of regulations from, here are the standards for rehabilitation, here are the standards for reconstruction, here are the standards for preservation. If you look at the town UDO, in particular 3.18, 3.18.3, we discuss the guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings. And it's partially is what we're trying to do when drafting this UDO, is to make it understandable for anybody who is coming in and applying to build within the town. It doesn't necessarily serve our purposes to have, okay, well, if you're going to do a reconstruction, we're going to follow these standards. If you're going to do a preservation, it's going to be these standards, because the work that will fall on staff to go through all these different standards and all the different staff reports, not to mention the complexity of just putting through these applications. So we went with the most common, the rehabilitation, because that's what you see more often than not in Bluffton. So this one is a little bit new, and I think you're right, Commissioner Simpson. What has been described is a reconstruction, which is consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards for historic preservation. That reconstruction is there is an acknowledged benefit, and it's something that can be done. Understandably, the the confusion that stemmed from saying we're going to rehabilitate and what we're going to do is move. And we've also heard replicate, we've heard reconstruct. There's all sorts of different terminology that we've heard demolish. I think we can, I would like to say that a demolition is not going to occur because, a demolition is a completely separate process that we have to follow. So I would like to kind of jettison that out the room. And so what we're considering really is, is this a reconstruction, and can y'all grant a COFA for reconstruction even though the standards are set forth for rehabilitation in our UDO? From a legal standpoint, again, the way that zoning ordinances are written, they are law, but they have injected into them certain degrees of subjectivity and common sense. Even the historic standards from the federal government, who often does not inject common sense or subjectivity into their regulations, have done so with the economic feasibility language and the reasonableness. And listening to the comments again here tonight, what it sounds like I have a few questions, but what we could do as a process is making sure that there are specific parts of this application that go back to a thorough review by staff and potentially the HPRC. And obviously the windows and the doors are an issue for a number of different commissioners. Making sure that those stay consistent. If this was new construction, obviously they wouldn't have to bring in old windows and old doors. They were sourced from somewhere else. We have alternatives under the UDO. Y'all have alternative materials that you've allowed and other, with other new construction for, cost effectiveness. So that kind of subjectivity has been allowed and has been delegated to staff before to make sure the determination as to the material, if I recall correctly, that has been submitted to staff. So I certainly think that is well within their capabilities with Glenn and Katie and Heather and Kevin and their entire team there. They're obviously, they have to come before you every single month. So they're going to make sure that they try to meet what y'all are telling them right now. And then obviously they're going to have to get full drawings done as part of the building permit application. So those will go through the process. Other than the doors and the windows, you have the roofing materials that we've discussed, and the applicant has kind of explained how they're going to go through that process. Is there any additional concern? Is there a process that y'all want to, obviously I think they're going to provide staff with what their planned replacement is if the roofing material is not sufficient. But is there any sort of advice or guidance you can give staff? Or if you think that's something that is such a big issue that needs to come to y'all, let me know.
For me, the piers, again, I go back to the piers and the foundation.
Maybe all those things, though. The doors, the windows, the roof, that's why we have the elevation, or we usually have the elevation in the window schedule. And it's...
And that makes perfect sense, because I don't come to all of your meetings, but I have been to many of them. And, typically the application package is substantial. It includes the elevations, includes very detailed information. And this is, again, that unique case where, what are you going to build? Well, it's there. You're looking at it. We're going to move it. We're just going to build it right here. We're going to use as many of the materials as we can. And hope that's, but you're right,
Your narrative
Commissioner
doesn't
Bell.
say that, though.
Absolutely. So in thinking through this and how we can help guide this applicant, because again, it does sound like the consensus about the project and the, what we're trying to accomplish is there. The pier design, as mentioned by Commissioner Simpson and Commissioner Box-Bell, the foundation is that something that the applicant feels comfortable speaking on about what sort of assurances can be provided?
Yeah, let me, just let me.
No, I just want, it addresses the foundation, because in the comments when we had our pre-application, the comments from staff was historic materials should be repaired and not replaced, brick steps to be replaced using the same historic brick foundation. Use of historic foundation materials already on site is preferable for use as new foundation. It's preferable.
And the material that you do have on site, you're going to utilize, and if you don't have enough of that material, you're going to find like kind.
Yeah, but
And
it's
you're not going to put brand new
nothing-
red brick there that.
Yeah, I mean, yes. The good news is nothing in this house was custom, so we can find most of the materials. So I understand your point on windows. I respect that that's what you're looking for. So I would like to have the agreement that we'll go back and we'll try and use what's there. If in fact we can't economically, as it relates to the standards, use it, we will use an equivalent period window. That's what I would like here. The doors, I think we can keep them. They're really just, yes, I think the doors we can keep. I don't know about the front door, but I understand the doors. And those doors those are doors you can pick up at Home Depot. They're just wood mahogany doors anyway, but we'll try and keep those doors. The metal pillars that Josh referenced on the side, our plan was to keep those because to me those actually scream 1960s original. The piers, we'll give you sections of the piers and how we're going to make those look like they do now. So I understand and respect that. The roof, yeah, the original part of the house, we're going to, as I said with the roof, we're going to use the material, and if there's a bad panel, we're going to take an existing panel up, and if we have new stuff, it's going to be, towards the back. So that, I think we agree on the strategy. We're going to, the lights on the outside, they're just jelly lights, as I remember. Those lights we can replicate, or we can use them to the degree possible. Drawings, I'll defer to what the relevant drawings you're looking for. I'll defer to Peter Scott on what you want there. And I think those things are not what I expected, but not unreasonable. Does that cover your list?
Mr. Marks, I have so much more. I think that takes care of the majority of my list, but we do have a couple of other issues that I don't think have been discussed, but were part of the staff's conditions that had to do with specific UDO standards. And then if I might defer to Katie on those, Ms. Peterson, allow her to come up here, and while I try to work on a motion that encapsulates what's been discussed, and then, again, discuss that with y'all, make sure y'all are on board, and then.
Even parallel to the street and such.
Okay, commissioners, the items that were part of the standards beyond section 318.3A, so it would be we're section 515.5F5, so a determination on the appropriateness of the placement, which is not parallel to the street which it faces, but does meet the, it matches the existing angle of the contributing structure and is part of the character of that structure on the site. So staff finds that this is appropriate, and I did mention that in the previous section of the staff report. So as it is a contributing resource which is not currently parallel to the street which it faces, town staff finds that it is appropriate to move the structure at the angle it is currently sited to retain its setting. One of the items that helps structures gain significance is their setting on the site. So it's not just the materials and how they interact with each other, but how the whole structure interacts with the site. So staff finds that this is an appropriate placement of it, but because it is a standard in the Unified Development Ordinance, we do need y'all's final determination on the appropriateness of that.
They're not moving the structure.
They are placing,
The new reconstruction, or the new.
They're placing this structure on a new frame.
I'm
Yeah, so in other words, that means the reconstruction, let's change that then. If someone's going to make the motion, could you flip back to that? We can't use the terminology you used, we have to use different terminology.
So this standard is for a contributing structure placed on a site and being moved on the site, a contributing structure being moved to a new location would be appropriate at the same angle as it currently is cited on the site plan.
So in other words, we're just taking, so we need to replicate.
So I think this standard really deals with the placement, obviously the placement of the structure.
Yes.
If it was a new construction, you would review that appropriately, but because this is a reconstruction, whether the reconstruction in this particular location is consistent with the standards, staff has said, it's their opinion, I believe I heard this correctly, staff has said in their opinion that it is appropriate. But it has to be a specific finding because it's one of those powers, one of those authorities that's delegated to the HPC under the UDO. So this
So it has to
actually
be
has to be a
included in our
specific
motion.
finding. Yes, sir.
The next item that is from section 515.6 of the UDO is that to ensure the architectural standards have been met for materials, dimensions, configurations, plans for all areas of the structure which will be dismantled and rebuilt, reconstructed, whichever term you like to use, or anything that is going to be new construction, so things that are just deteriorated beyond repair and need to be rebuilt. Plans for those will need to be provided to ensure that they are able to meet the design criteria found in section 515.5 of the Unified Development Ordinance.
And also just be provided in the plans that they're getting for their building.
I would encourage them to be provided before they submit for a building permit, because if there are challenges with those plans, by the time they submit for building permit, all of the engineering for that plan will have been done and submitted with it, and it could prove to be very cost prohibitive to have to re-engineer plans if they are not meeting the intent of the HPC's approval, should you make one. And then the last item is that per section 515.6I, additional information is required regarding the rear elevation, specifically where the proposed window is going to be where there is currently a door. This would be covered in those additional information for areas that would be rebuilt if that is how this is going to move forward.
That'll be on the plan, right?
Hopefully, that's
Yeah,
what
I
we're
mean,
looking for.
It was shown and it just seems like that.
Shown on the drawing.
Yeah.
It's shown, the location of it is shown on the floor plans, but the dimensions of it and how that interacts with the rest of that site,
Elevation is,
yes,
the
it's
elevation
not
is
provided.
missing.
And that's what I've got.
Richardson, looks like you're getting ready to step forward, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I get started, I just want to make sure that I mention, because of the public comment that was read into the record, but also the discussion and how, in the difficulty of this particular application, just to, again, thank staff, because we've discussed the subjectivity that can get inserted by the HPC into this, the review of this sort of criteria. Staff doesn't often have that sort of luxury available. They have to be as objective as possible in reviewing a lot of this criteria and maintain these standards that staff often follows. And I want to thank them, because this is obviously all these applications are difficult. They're very detail focused and very and can be very, very complex. So I did want to make sure that I mentioned that staff does a wonderful job, as y'all well know, and as I hope the public, anybody who's watching knows. But in moving forward on this application, what I am hearing from the HPC, and again, this is just a proposal by me, that I hope meets all of y'all's criteria, is to approve the application with conditions for the reconstruction of the Joyner House at 9 Bruin Road, subject to the following conditions. The first condition is the retention of the metal pillars. Second condition is retain all original components to the maximum degree reasonable and economically feasible. 3, any substitutes to original windows, doors, brick foundation, brick piers, and roofing panels needs to be submitted to staff for a review and a determination as to the appropriateness of the substitute materials. 4, that the proposed location of the structure is appropriate since it matches the angle of the structure originally in accordance with Section 515.5F5 of the UDO. Again, that's kind of the notes I took. I hope they meet with everything y'all are trying to get across. And again, I'm not I think Miss Adams, as you may remember, Bruce, Miss Gallagher Adams, teased me for months about not knowing what a shutter dog was. So I work as best I can with what I hear.
And actually, I called her and talked to her extensively about this, so, yeah.
I'm impressed. I thought that was good.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would,
Hold, go ahead. And then-
did you note anything related to the screen porch? That motion?
I did not, but I will certainly add that. What's the condition that we're contemplating about the screen porch?
Porch and side portico details for the porch and side portico to be provided for review. And again, that's going to come with the architectural drawings for new construction.
So again, he's gonna, if I understood, when I heard you were gonna construct it in the manner that it was originally constructed and not in today's technology or today's construction. I guess the screens are on the out or something like that? But
Yes, yeah. I mean, if you look at the picture, that's what it's gonna look like, and I think that, Amanda, did you do a drawing of the porch?
Screen of the porch, yeah.
Did you look at the picture?
There's a section of the way the porch framing is.
So she's,
Just going through the staff recommendations and just overlaying that to see, hopefully, that hopefully everything's caught, that everyone has intended to provide input on.
so what, I wanna make sure so what?
we're just looking for clarification that you're doing it in the same manner that it was built, I think. Just,
It was staff recommendation number 8, number 10, number 11 that are still pertinent to what we're talking about, in my opinion.
And staff just brought that to my attention as well.
Yes, so number 4, 8, 10, and 11, you covered 9. And I think that we've encompassed the other conversations that have been had tonight in your motion. It's just those 4, 8, 10, and 11.
So I'm gonna run through these again and make sure that our applicant back here also knows exactly what we're looking for is the retention of the metal. It's approved with conditions for the reconstruction of the Joyner House.
could I just interrupt? If you're mentioning this, is it possible for the board to use the motion that you're presenting and just say that that's the motion that we're going to have? I'm just asking.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's what I was hoping would be
And
done.
that's what I was just, I wanted to clarify that for all and for all to understand what we're doing here.
Bruce, I expect you to remember every word.
How come you don't have it written down on the computer? What's wrong with you?
I know, I need to be better. A motion to approve with conditions for the reconstruction of the Joyner House at 9 Bruin Road and subject to the following conditions. Conditions number 4 in the staff report, which is per 318.3A, Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation. It's about regarding the proposed reconstruction of the front screen porch and side portico must be provided to staff for a staff level review to ensure they meet the standards of this section. And also staff condition 8, staff condition 10, and staff condition 11. In addition to staff conditions, a condition that the metal pillars be retained, that the applicant retain all original components of the structure to the maximum degree reasonably and economically feasible, that the applicant provide any substitutes to original windows, doors, brick foundation, brick piers, and roofing panels to staff for a determination as to the appropriateness of the substitute materials, that the proposed location of the structure is appropriate since it matches the angle of the structure originally in accordance with section 515.5F5 of the UDO. And finally, that staff review and approve drawings for the reconstructed porch and side portico, which may have been involved in some of those earlier conditions. So that's the proposed motion that I would recommend. I can read it again if the applicants need it, or if y'all need me to take something off.
You have that down? Okay. Just checking. Discussion with the commissions. Is there anything that wasn't covered?
I don't believe so.
So therefore, this is before a motion, and I'm just curious, is there clarity to the applicant on? Because we're not in a motion.
Thank
so
you for your
therefore-
consideration, your reasonableness, and we'll move forward and we'll adhere to what you've requested. Thank you.
Okay. So, looking for,
I would like to make a motion to accept the motion that is on the table as read by Mr. LaBruce.
very good. And,
I'll second it.
so, any further discussion? That, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
It was passed unanimously with those, that motion as stated. So, you have the motion, and looks like you did well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank y'all.
That's impressive.
It's nice to have.
Very rare.
Mr. Marks, we'll follow up with a formal letter that states all of those things that were in the motion, so that it's out there for you as well.
That'd be great, because I just wasn't sure what the process was to change it, the application, the current one, from rehabilitation to reconstruction. I guess, did we address that?
Actually,
We will follow up with you on that. So that that's,
You'll figure that out, okay.
Are we done?
well, with the motion that we have, I don't think that's not, I'm confused. I don't think that's necessary because that's what the motion is, so you don't have to submit. You just proceed forward with the motion as passed and follow the directive of that motion.
So the motion.
Is that correct?
There are resubmitted materials that will be required based on those conditions, but changing the application from one type to a different is not necessary. It's just the additional information as outlined in that motion. And Mr. Chairman, we do not have any discussion items on the agenda tonight for you.
Boy, well, that's a good thing. And so therefore, you know what I'm looking for is a motion for adjournment.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
And I'm looking for a second. Second. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous.